Finance Minister.
Mr. Deputy Chairman, sir, I'm extremely grateful to all the honourable members who have extensively commented on the finance bill. We've already had a detailed discussion on the budget, which really covers many policy matters. And there is an overlapping discussion, particularly with reference to some taxation proposals, which takes place in the finance bill itself. Shri VP Singh initiated the discussion, and I think my friend Jairam Ramesh made a very forceful speech on behalf of his party. He said it's his last major intervention. I hope it is not. He has been
We want such intervention.
making very valuable contributions to this House, and I hope he is there in future to make such contributions itself. There were many firsts that he has scored. He took up an issue of a state PSU and said that the central legislature must discuss them. It normally doesn't happen. If state assemblies follow the same principle, then reports of the central CAG will be discussed in state assemblies. This is the kind of precedent which we are setting, we must bear in mind. I'll deal with the substance of what he has raised. It's only incidental that another first that he has scored is that he is the first member of parliament to tell the Supreme Court that you must now start interfering with speakers and chairpersons' rulings with regard to the conduct of the business of the houses. But I think he is the first congressman to score a new first. He is the first congressman who had the history to publicly praise Dr. Subramaniam Swamy. He advised me to consult him. I am conscious of the experience and wisdom of Dr. Swamy. He first became a member of this House in 1974. He's a well-known economist. I'll certainly consult him, but I must compliment the courage and conviction of Jairam Ramesh, that whereas he concentrated on 3 Gs, he probably let down the 4th one, in as much as he indulged in this new misadventure of doing what he did today. For the first time, somebody said, I start doubting the figures as far as the Indian economy is concerned. The GDP figures are not decided by some internal exercise in the finance ministry. The Central Statistical Organization functions at an arm's length distance from the North Bloc. In fact, when they release data, we also come to know of the data only from the media. Even 5 minutes earlier, we are not aware of the data when they release it. It functions absolutely independently. It functioned in the same manner as the UPA during the UPA government. It functions in the same manner today. Now, periodically they change the base year. So they changed the base year with effect from 2011. So the growth figures during the last 3 years of the 2 years of the UPA were also correspondingly revised. So it is not that some exercise that the NDA government has done in order to push up and give an appearance of a statistical growth. The world today uniformly acknowledges, and you should have the broad shoulders to acknowledge, that India is a fast-growing economy. I think Dr. Jadhav, who made his maiden speech, I must compliment him for a very well-researched, eloquently delivered speech today. He made a correct proposition that as far as the world is concerned, most countries in the world today, if you see, are in the range of -2 to +2 GDP growth range. They are facing severe crisis. Compared to them, we are doing much better at about 7.5%. But compared to our own ability, we probably can do much better. And I think that was the substance of what Dr. Jadhav said, and it is a view that most of us subscribe to. The real challenge is that we are functioning in an environment where there are no global tailwinds which are supporting us. There are obstructive headwinds. Countries can grow, as Dr. Jadhav said, at 10% and 9% when the global environment is a fast-moving environment. If the global environment is an obstructive environment, then your currencies are going to fluctuate, your stock markets itself will be more turbulent, your exports will shrink because the global trade shrinks. And in the face of all those unpredictabilities, for any economy in a slowdown environment, where the global growth now has been scaled down periodically from 3.7 to 3.4 to 3.1. Emerging economies has been scaled down to 4%. Asian growth from 5.9 to 5.7. Now, when it's being scaled down world over, the global situation is an impediment. So if growth returns to the world, then probably our potential to push our own growth would be much higher. Our growth is also dependent on some other variables. One of the other variables is that if we have a good monsoon, because we've had 2 years of inadequate monsoon, then of course the agricultural growth will push up. We get out of this agrarian distress partly, and that will increase the purchasing capacity of the Indian farm sector and have a spiral effect on other sectors also. So this 7.5, 7.6% to go up, probably in that situation could happen. Additionally, this would lead to a lot of rural demand. Today, we are depending on increased public spending, increased FDI, significant urban demand, and if rural demand is added to it, I think that also helps us. The third important variable also is the fact that are we able to revive the competitiveness of India's private sector. Private sector had overstressed itself. They had extensively borrowed from banks, and now the slowdown has resulted in several sectors going down. Many of those sectors were not addressed, they have now been addressed. Hopefully, if that situation takes place, and some of those sectors improve, steel, improves sugar, infrastructure, power, these are the 5-6 stress sectors, then the balance sheet of these sectors correspondingly will have an impact on the balance sheet of the banks itself, and that itself could help us. And that brings me to the last point in this category, a point my friend Jairam Ramesh made with regard to our ability to continue with the reform process, something that Dr. Jadhav had mentioned. And the whole country is, the whole world is really looking at us. Are we able to continue with some of the reform measures, particularly bring the goods and services tax? Now it is said that it was being obstructed by the NDA, now it's being obstructed by somebody else. Well, let me honestly confess, there was no consensus at that time between the states. A goods and services tax alters the taxation paradigm of the entire country. Today, the center decides on its own taxes, the states decide on their taxes. The result of this entire exercise is that you have different rates of taxation across the country. There is no seamless transfer of goods or services which takes place. A GST, and I concede it was your UPA idea in the first instance, economically unites the whole country. You have a uniform rate of taxation, and that uniform rate of taxation will allow a seamless transfer of goods and services across the country. It will avoid and check the kind of evasion which takes place. It will improve upon compliances. And the entire authority to decide how much tax will really vest in the GST Council, which is 2/3 represented by the states and 1/3 by the center. And by consensus, we'll have to come to that finding. One of the first things that we did was to bring about 100% consensus between the states. And let me tell you, all these three objections which you are raising, I have been in touch with all the Congress chief ministers, and each one of your states is a strong GST supporter because they know they are going to benefit out of this exercise. No state lost when VAT was introduced. Everybody benefited. It was just the fear of unknown which some states had. Now let me come to these 3 points of objection which you have raised. And I have already publicly said, so I don't mind repeating it. The manufacturing states had a reservation during the UPA regime. They said we have invested in infrastructure because of which we are manufacturing. GST is a destination tax. And as a destination tax, where monies are spent and goods or services are bought, that state gets the advantage. So what advantage do I get having spent so much money in manufacturing? The consuming states are going to benefit because it's a destination tax. Now, one area, because the process was on, which UPA could not achieve, was to convince the manufacturing states that, all right, we will take care of your interest if you have invested in infrastructure. Gujarat, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, these are all manufacturing. And mind you, this was not a BJP, Congress, UPA, NDA issue. It was manufacturing states which had a particular concern. So a consensus was arrived at that for a 2-year period, a 1% additional tax on interstate movement of goods and services will take place. Now, it is true that this 1% is against the concept of a destination tax. All the chief ministers agreed. The select committee of Rajya Sabha has said, no, drop this 1% idea. And I have said I am willing to go back to the states and persuade them to drop this idea. So it's not really a contentious issue. The second issue you mentioned is, let's have a dispute settlement process. And the dispute settlement process that you are suggesting is, if states can't decide in the GST Council, a body headed by the Supreme Court judge must then decide. For heaven's sake, I beseech you, in the interest of Indian democracy, not to go on this misadventure. And I'll give you the good reason why. With the manner in which encroachment of legislative and executive authority by India's judiciary is taking place, probably financial power and budget making is the last of the only powers that you have left. Taxation is the only power which states have. It would be wholly misconceived for any party to say, let us hand over the taxation power also to the judiciary. That is your proposal. Please let me just complete. But let me tell you, let me give you the history of that proposal. Anandji, just give me 1 minute, then I'll yield after this. In the original GST which was proposed and introduced by you in Parliament, you had a dispute settlement. The present Honorable President had introduced it. The Standing Committee went into it and gave a unanimous view that it is dangerous to have a dispute redressal, that if center and states can't decide कि कितना टैक्स लगेगा किस आइटम पे, तो सुप्रीम कोर्ट जज की एक कमेटी होगी, वो डिसाइड करेगी. तो कृपया ये मत कीजिए. और कांग्रेस के जितने सदस्य थे स्टैंडिंग कमेटी में, उन्होंने भी सहमति की. मैं अभी देख रहा था जब मैंने कहा डोंट हैंड ओवर द टैक्सेशन पावर टू द कोर्ट, ईच वन ऑफ योर मेंबर्स वाज थंपिंग द डेस्क. And therefore, the Standing Committee unanimously said that this power must be decided between it's a political issue. Supposing Odisha says this tax is required, between Odisha and the center, between Odisha and the other states, it has to be sorted out politically. You can't hand over this power. I have not read the judgment, but today I have seen on television that we have the NDRF and the SDRF, the State Disaster Relief Fund and the Central Relief Fund. The Supreme Court has directed us to create a new fund. Now we have passed the appropriation bill. Mr. Bhupender Singh just now mentioned. Now we have already passed the appropriation bill. From where do I get this extra money outside the appropriation bill to comply with this direction of the Supreme Court? Can't you see, step by step, brick by brick, the edifice of India's legislature is being destroyed? And outside the appropriation bill, we are being told, create this levy, create this fund by an institution other. There can't be any tax, there can't be any expenditure unless it is approved by Parliament. So today, when I mentioned it, Jairam, please don't misunderstand me. If a speaker's ruling is going to be subject to judicial review, if India's budget making is going to be subject to a court, you see, now I think your party leaders have not informed you. In the General Purposes Committee, which I won't go into the detail, what are sub judice, what are not sub judice, there's a whole discourse in which we had in the General Purposes Committee. So we will tell courts to have a judicial review of presiding officers' rulings. We'll have budget making going on outside the appropriation bill. And if there is a taxation dispute between a center and a state, a major party says, let a judge now resolve it. So the taxation power also moves. Now, when this proposal of the standing committee went to the UPA government, Mr. Chidambaram very rightly and wisely recorded on the file, I changed my original, I don't remember the word, I accept the recommendation of the standing committee. So to have a GST council of states and center, where states will have 2/3 vote, center will have 1/3 vote, is a suggestion which was accepted by Mr. Chidambaram. And having accepted that suggestion of the standing committee, which was a very wise suggestion and rightly accepted by Mr. Chidambaram, you now turn back and say, no, our insistence is create a dispute redressal mechanism where taxation dispute between center and state, we will appoint a judge to resolve it. Pardon?
What you just referred to is 1/3 of the center and 2/3 of the states. That's the GST council when we are talking of.
That council will decide,
No,
and the voting will
correct.
be that every,
No.
Anandji, the voting will be that every decision will be by a 3/4 majority. So both
Yes,
center and
yes.
states have to work together.
But whether the GST council has accepted this
Absolutely.
as a credible dispute redressal mechanism.
They have accepted it. And,
This is
and
still
they
a
have
work in
further said,
progress.
and the bill further says that in case there is a problem, the GST council itself will decide a mechanism for its resolution.
But that's keeping it loose-ended.
So the bill itself
We'll talk
says
about it later.
that if in the council, supposing there is a deadlock, then what happens? The deadlock will be resolved by a procedure decided by the GST council. So the GST council can say the 3 senior most chief ministers and or 2 senior most chief ministers and the finance minister of the country will sit and resolve it. They can have a political mechanism to resolve it. After all, these are political problems which have to be resolved politically. These are not judicially determinable matters. As to how much share will West Bengal get and how much share will we get. Now let me come to this third question. Okay, now let's not divert the issue. I think we can afford to be serious once in a while. Now let's come to your third objection. Now let me come to your third objection, and your third objection has a very checkered history. You relied on Article 276. And the argument which you have been giving, so first of all, this 18% cap, how is this 18% cap and this idea of a constitutional cap gone? When Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, the Honorable President today, introduced the GST, there was no cap. When Mr. Chidambaram had it referred to the standing committee, there was no cap. When the standing committee's recommendations came, there was no cap. When you finalized those recommendations and went out of government, there was no cap. So throughout the UPA, there was no cap as far as the constitution is concerned, as far as the GST is concerned. So the cap never existed. Ek minute. Let me explain it, then I'll yield. Then whoever has an objection, issue can raise it. Now suddenly you say, well, there must be a 18% cap provided in the constitution itself. I have no difficulty with 18%. I have no difficulty with the figure of 18%. Taxes must be reasonable. So the idea of 18% is, if all the taxes of the center and state taken together, it should not be a very high rate of taxation, it should be not exceed 18. But let me just assume a crisis situation. Now there's a fallacy to have a uniform cap. And that's something that you suggested. Situation one, there is a drought in the country. And a state says, 5 states come and say, I am suffering from a drought, I need more money, more taxes. So for 1 year, they want to charge 20%. Are we then going to first amend the constitution? And we all know how difficult it is to amend the constitution. And not only will Parliament, both houses amend it, we will send it to all the states to amend it. कि अगर देश के 5 राज्यों में सूखा पड़ गया और 1 साल के लिए उनको 18% से ज्यादा लेना पड़ा, तो पहले संविधान को बदलो. Second, the second fallacy of 18%, that there can't be a uniform tax for all commodities. You will have commodities which the Aam Aadmi uses. We will say it could be 6%, 12%, depending on what, that's for the GST Council. Then you may have luxury products. Anand ji, should a BMW car manufactured in India be taxed only at 18%? It should be taxed at much more. Why do you want a constitutional cap? A luxury product will have to be taxed at a much higher rate. Why do you want a cap in the constitution? Now the third question, Jairam, you raised this issue that Article 276 says so. Let me tell you, as a student of the constitution, and I've gone into the genesis, that's your last resort, कि एक संविधान में provision है, Article 276, which puts a cap. So if one provision puts a cap, everything else must do it. Now let me tell you, if I was asked to single out, and if you ask chief ministers of state to single out one provision of the constitution which deserves to be deleted forthwith, it is 276. And if you want to know the history of 276, this is a problem where in a constituent assembly you have too many lawyers as members. Because you had too many lawyers as members, they never thought of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. They never thought of the farmers. But they had one provision in the constitution which said a tax on professionals will have a cap of 500 rupees. 500 रुपए से ज्यादा जो professional है उस पर tax नहीं लग सकता. I think, say the least, it was an unwarranted provision. It should never have been in the Constitution. In 1988, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi's government considered deleting it, but finally some sense prevailed. They said, all right, ये 500 को हम 2500 कर देते हैं. और आज भी कोई लोकल गवर्नमेंट अगर किसी प्रोफेशनल पे टैक्स लगाना चाहे तो 2500 की कैप है. So this came into the Constitution because of the overwhelming presence of the lawyers in the Constituent Assembly. And this provision is being cited by you and by my predecessor that this is the golden rule, therefore you must have caps in the Constitution. Now this is the history of that cap that you are citing. Two wrongs never make a right. And therefore the sooner 276 is deleted, it's a rational provision. I could understand for any weaker section of society to have a constitutional cap. But to say that local authorities will not tax professionals beyond 2,500, in 2016 this is the provision. A class 4 employee in the government or in the private sector also pays more tax. So to cite such a provision, which is a misconceived provision in the Constitution, as a precedent for the entire party's argument, my submission to you is that if India needs to grow, our capacity at reforming ourselves, bringing major tax reforms, and every state has agreed, and therefore please reconsider your position. I have no difficulty with the 18%, but putting an 18% cap in the Constitution itself and surrendering parliamentary and state legislatures' jurisdiction on taxation to a judge to decide, I think the last of the powers left with the courts, with the legislature itself would always be surrendered. And therefore, when we meet again in the monsoon session, I think it will be an appropriate time for us to take a view. And the government's position is very clear. Every state has to implement GST. So we want all parties to be on board, all state governments to be on board. Therefore, I would request your party to reconsider its position. And if you don't reconsider this position, then please allow the parliamentary process of decision by voting to take place. Because ultimately then we are questioning India's ability to implement a reform which
We are the original authors and proponents of the GST. Is but a democratic right and exercise of that right that the political party has raised certain concerns. Now we should not try to get this wrong impression that if you are seeking a ceiling, ceiling is uniform ceiling for luxury and consumer good for the common person. We are not seeking that.
Anandji.
Second issue, I agree with you that when it comes, there are certain issues to be still discussed, which we are not fully convinced or satisfied, and the right way would be for the parliament to discuss and debate at the appropriate time. Perhaps this is not the right time because how do you ring fence? There are so many windows and doors kept open. These are the issues perhaps it will require a focused discussion.
Well, I'm extremely grateful to Shri Anand Sharma. I'll certainly be discussing once again with you and your colleagues. But I think this is a subject on which you should take a considered view and not deviate from the proposals which two of your very eminent finance ministers themselves had accepted. And they had accepted it after considerable consensus in the standing committees itself. Your issue of gas, I don't want to go into the questions my colleague Mr. Dharmendra Pradhan has raised. Sir, exploration itself is scientific, but it also has an element of gamble. You can, for mining purposes, for oil exploration, for gas exploration, you can keep on digging. You may get it, you may not get it. So always and that's the correct conspicuous of facts. When you start digging and investing, these are very high investment projects. You may dig at 5 places, you may waste all your money and get no gas or no oil, At the 6th place you may get it. And you are here looking in terms of very deep sea exploration. Because India has to try and become as self-sufficient in these areas as possible. Now you have in the KG basin, international majors like BP, Reliance doing it, the ONGC doing it, the GSPC, a state public sector doing it. So it is true that they thought initially that it's going to be 21 trillion cubic feet. And therefore the estimates are based on this. Banks lend money, they lend money to everyone. When you say that Naresh Agrawal said banks, monies are owed to banks. Well, monies are owed to banks is a good thing. What is owed becoming a non-performing asset is a bad thing. अगर बैंक lending ही नहीं करेगा, तो देश में विकास कैसे होगा? Banks lend for growth. So if banks are lending to thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs in this country, it's a good thing. Monies will be owed to the banks, but those loans have to be serviced in terms of interest. When you can't pay the interest, the performing asset becomes non-performing. Now, in this case, where 21 TCF is anticipated, after a great deal of difficulty and consistent failures, they finally hit upon gas. So you are investing money, it will show that you have spent 20,000 crores of money. When you hit upon gas and the gas starts being extracted and selling, then you will start recovering the money. That's a business cycle of the whole operators. And international experts, international certified agencies have now certified it is not 21 TCF, it is not 1 TCF as you mentioned, that at least they have internationally respected agencies have certified that 14.4 TCF is available in that particular field.
That's not true. I have an authenticated document. I will authenticate it. It's from the annual report of the GSPC. This is not a Subramanian Swamy type of an authentication. I will do it right away. 21, it's 20 TCF, is now 1.1 TCF. Please, let's not mislead people. Let's not mislead people. Let's not mislead.
House, you are quoting only from 3 fields. You are quoting from 3 fields.
Now let me.
Reserves are falling and bank loans are going up. I mean, this is wonderful due diligence. Proven reserves are falling and bank loans are going up.
That there is 14.4 TCF is certified by one of the most respectable international certifying agencies, Gaffin Klein Associates. Now be specific and go to the net and search it out.
No, I don't go by the net, I go by the annual report.
And this report, let me be very clear.
Also dealt with
what are we
oil and gas.
discussing?
There are proven
What are we
reserves,
discussing?
there are probable reserves, and there are probable plus possible reserves. We are talking of proven reserves. It's not 20, it's 1.1 TCF.
Director General Hydrocarbons, during the UPA, before they start exploring, he has to certify it and allow them. It's only when he was satisfied that he did it. And Tapanji, let me tell you, we have discussed several issues. You are one of the most pro-public sector people I have seen. And today you want to let a public sector die? Every time you come to us and say, please help this public sector from the budget resources, etc., pay their salaries, etc. And today you say, all right, merely because it is Gujarat, you want to have a public sector die.
Your KG Basin offshore drilling thing is a very fishy affair, not from today, from 2006. At every point of time, I have written to earlier petroleum minister, to to earlier Prime Minister and also subsequently. I think Dharmendra Pradhan is quite aware of that.
Sir,
And it is a part of that KG Basin area, KG Basin scandalous area. Please go into that. Don't believe in anybody's face value, whosoever tells
give my colleague the credit. Give my colleague the credit of bringing down $8.4 down to what, 3.5? $8.4 को वो 3.5 पे कीमत ले आए हैं.
Sit down. We get it. Now sit down. Okay. We can now discuss. Yes. We can have now sit down. Now बैठी. अभी बैठी. Yes, yes. Yeah, बैठिए. Yes, yes.
Sir,
please.
there are various other suggestions. Let me, in a nutshell, say that many honorable members have given suggestions. Fortunately, as far as the initial stages are concerned, if monsoons are good, as I said, yesterday we had the first batch of revenue figures for the month of April. And for the month of April, we had an indirect taxation increase of 42%. Now, indirect taxation, whereas estimates on various estimates, including GDP, these are all calculations. Revenue is real. Unless money comes into your pocket, there can't be a substitute or an alternative to this. Therefore, we've had a first month this year has started with a 42% increase in indirect taxes, which is actually a good sign. And if we have a good monsoon, hopefully, sir, we'll have a good year ahead of us. And I just want to tell the members that there are a number of decisions which we've been taking, slowly but surely, which are going on in the direction of strengthening the economy. Just one last decision I must take into confidence. Yesterday, we had the double taxation treaty with Mauritius after renegotiation. If you remember, from 1983 onwards, we have a treaty with Mauritius that, and many members have repeatedly commented on it, where capital gains is not payable if that route is followed through Mauritius. From 1996, India has been trying to renegotiate that. Finally, in the last 1 year, we had 4 rounds of discussions. We've been able to renegotiate. And as a part of the renegotiation, we are phasing out some of those aspects. And hopefully, the fears which members had that the route can partly also be used for round tripping as far as that money is concerned. In an effort against black money, we have even gone ahead and tried to minimize the dangers of that particular situation. With effect from 2019, the entire investment would be liable to pay capital gains tax at a particular rate. Between 17 and 19, they'll be liable to pay 50% of it. And till 1917, so that there is no immediate impact on the market, we have grandfathered all past and investments which will take place till 1/4/17. With these few comments, sir, I commend that this House take up for consideration the finance bill and return it to the Lok Sabha.
Okay.